You're listening to Short History Shorts audio, where history speaks louder than images. In the heart of ancient Carthage, beyond its bustling harbors and foreign embassies, a quieter power operated, a power rooted not in swords, ships, or silver, but in the invisible machinery of law. The Carthaginians, heirs of the Phoenician merchant tradition, were no strangers to rules. They built their empire on negotiation, contract, and control. While their courts were not as famously recorded as Roman tribunals or Athenian assemblies, Carthage maintained a structured legal system, one that reflected its oligarchic government, sacred traditions, and obsession with order. This system was sophisticated enough to impress even Aristotle, who praised Carthage's constitution as one of the best in the ancient world. Though the details of Carthaginian law are fragmentary today, what survives reveals a civilization where justice was elite-controlled, politically guarded, and deeply tied to religious and commercial custom. At the top of Carthaginian legal structure stood the suffetes, two annually elected magistrates who functioned similarly to Roman consuls or Phoenician judges. The term suffet itself derives from the Hebrew word shofet, meaning judge, and their main duty was to oversee civic and legal matters. These were not kings or generals but civil authorities, presiding over trials, managing public disputes, and issuing judgments. However, unlike Roman consuls, the suffetes lacked military command. Their power was checked by the Senate, the Adurim, and by powerful councils composed of aristocratic families. Thus, law in Carthage was not impartial in a modern sense. It was a tool managed by an oligarchy that sought stability and control over both citizens and colonies. The Carthaginian Senate, composed of some 300 members drawn from elite merchant families, played a crucial role in lawmaking and legal interpretation. Most laws likely came not from public assemblies, but from behind closed doors, crafted and enforced by the political aristocracy. The Senate also had a judicial role in resolving disputes that affected the state, including treason, corruption, and political misconduct. In fact, Carthage was known for an especially strict court of judges who investigated public officials for misbehavior or financial impropriety. Aristotle noted that if magistrates were found guilty of corruption, they were often fined and barred from future office. The weight of accountability rested heavily on Carthage's elite, not because of a love of democracy, but because oligarchs feared instability. Internal betrayal was punished harshly to preserve the unity of the ruling class. Outside of elite politics, the average Carthaginian citizen encountered law most directly in the regulation of trade, contracts, and property. As a mercantile empire, Carthage depended on legal clarity to support commercial life. Contracts were enforced with written agreements, sealed before officials or temple authorities. The fact that Carthage maintained commercial colonies across North Africa, Spain, Sardinia, and Sicily suggests a strong reliance on legal norms that could be transported and respected across cultural boundaries. Merchant disputes likely involved mediators or local judges, and colonies often had their own versions of Carthaginian courts, staffed by local aristocrats or appointed governors. There's also evidence that the city's temples may have played a legal role, storing documents, hosting oaths, and witnessing agreements, especially those involving land or family matters. Carthaginian law was also religious. The gods, particularly Baal-Hamon and Tanit, were central to the moral fabric of the city, and religious transgressions were seen as threats to public safety. Some offenses, such as sacrilege, oath-breaking, or defiling a sacred site, could bring severe punishment, not just legally, but ritually. The Tophet, the city's infamous sanctuary where infant sacrifices were allegedly performed, may have functioned as both a sacred site and a space of expiation for serious sins. In this sense, justice was not only legal but spiritual. You weren't just breaking the law, you were disrupting the balance between people and the divine. Carthage also enforced social order through surveillance of behavior and loyalty. The use of informants, council investigations, and elite-controlled punishments helped keep dissent in check. Political rivals could be exiled or publicly humiliated, while generals who failed in war were often punished after returning home. Sometimes with death, more often with loss of status. Hannibal himself, after his famous campaigns in Italy, later became a victim of this system. Despite his victories, his reforms of the oligarchic system were too radical for the ruling elite, and he was eventually forced into exile after being denounced to Rome. This pattern was not uncommon. The The Carthaginian legal world prized obedience, consensus, and predictability. Individual heroism was tolerated, but not if it threatened the balance of the ruling class. As for punishment, Carthaginian law favored fines and social penalties over brutal public executions. Although severe crimes could result in death or exile, many offenses were likely handled through monetary restitution, loss of office, or public shame. Physical mutilation or mass imprisonment, common in other ancient societies, seems to have been rare in Carthage, possibly because the city's focus on commerce made workforce preservation more valuable than spectacle. Nonetheless, some punishments were symbolic and harsh. For instance, corrupt judges or generals could be denied burial rights, a spiritual punishment that denied them honor in the afterlife. One of the most unique features of Carthaginian legal thinking was its corporate mentality. Law in Carthage was not just about individual rights, it was about preserving collective harmony. The city's commercial orientation, dependence on a slave-based economy, and religious formalism made it deeply conservative. Innovation in law was rare. Tradition ruled. Unlike the Roman system, which evolved through legal commentary and precedent, Carthaginian law remained embedded in elite practice, oral codes, and inherited procedures. There was no universal written code akin to the Roman 12 tables. Instead, law lived in custom, enforced by generations of aristocratic judges and sufetes who passed down decisions through institutions rather than scrolls. That said, Carthage was not lawless or chaotic. Far from it. The system was efficient, orderly, and respected within its context. The city functioned for centuries without collapse, managing colonies, suppressing revolts, and enforcing contracts with precision. Aristotle's praise of the Carthaginian government was rooted in this very observation, that the city blended aristocratic authority with checks on corruption, that its legal mechanisms, while hidden from the masses, delivered political stability over generations. Even after Rome's destruction of the city in 146 BC, echoes of Carthaginian legal culture survived in Punic-speaking regions of North Africa. The Roman Empire absorbed many Punic elites into its provincial systems, and some Roman laws in Africa, proconsularis, even retained terms or procedures that may have originated in Carthage. Though the city was razed and its laws scattered, its influence persisted through commerce, memory, and tradition. In the end, Carthage governed not just with warships, but with laws. Through a quiet machinery of judges, traditions, and commercial discipline, it maintained control over a vast and diverse empire. Law and order in Carthage was elite, religious, and conservative, but it worked. For hundreds of years, it held a growing empire together through the balance of power, honor, and the fear of divine and social consequence. In a world of swords and sieges, Carthage proved that the pen and the contract could rule just as effectively